Chapter 5, Part 2. Barney threw the tin away in disgust, and a voice said, "All right, mister, come out, we've got you covered." It was the Snargets. They'd played a trick on him and crept back. He came out of the shack and faced the Snargets. One had a broken down old airgun, and the others were pointing sticks. "Caw, it ain't Albert!" exclaimed the youngest Snarget. "We can see that," said the oldest roughly. "What's your name?" he said to Barney in the same voice. "Barney," said Barney. "What's yours?" "I'm the Lone Ranger, and he's Robin Hood, and he's William Tell," snapped the eldest Snarget. "Golly!" exclaimed Barney. "Quiet!" snapped the first Snarget. "What was you doing in our shack?" "Yes, and what do you mean by chucking dirt at us?" asked the second Snarget. "Yes, and what you doing in our dump anyway?" piped the youngest fiercely. "Can if I want to," replied Barney, pretending not to mind. But he was not really feeling very comfortable. He was not sure just how rough these Snargets could get. "Can if he wants to, he says," exclaimed the Lone Ranger, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "What shall we do with him, fellas?" "Tie him to a tree and shoot him. I'm full of arrows," suggested Robin Hood. "Put him in a dungeon and leave him to rot," said William Tell. "No, I reckon we ought to lynch him on the spot. String him up," said the Lone Ranger masterfully. "We ain't got no rope," said Robin Hood. "Well, we ain't got no bows and arrows," pointed out William Tell. "Well, there certainly ain't no dungeon for miles around," said the Lone Ranger. "Let's just give him a bit of a slow torture." "You wouldn't dare," said Barney, but he didn't feel too sure. "Oh, wouldn't we?" sneered the Lone Ranger. "That's what you think. We often do, don't we, fellas? Do it all the time, don't we? Give people the slow torture." "Yes, and shoot 'em full of arrows," agreed Robin Hood. "And put 'em in dungeons," added William Tell. "I'd tell a policeman," said Barney stoutly. The eldest Snarget looked carefully around the pit. "Can't see no policeman here," he said scornfully. "I'd tell my granny, and she lives just up there," said Barney. The Snargets collapsed in howls of laughter. "He'd tell his granny, he says. Hear that, fellas? He'd tell his granny," they cackled. Barney felt his face going red and tears coming into his eyes. Then he thought of something. "I'm going to tell Stig," he said calmly. The laughter went on. "He's going to tell his Stig," cackled the Snargets. But Barney just stood there and smiled, and the laughter gradually died down. "Who's Stig?" the eldest Snarget asked suspiciously. "Oh, a friend of mine," replied Barney airily. "Gone, there ain't no such person," said the second doubtfully. "Yes, there is, and he's my friend," said Barney. "Where's he live?" squeaked the smallest Snarget. "Here," said Barney. "Here?" chorused the Snarget scornfully. "What, in the dump?" jeered the eldest Snarget, and they all laughed as if he had made a joke. "Yes," said Barney. "Didn't you know?" "Go on, you half tell him," said the second. "What's he do? Tell us that then." "He makes bows out of television aerials and arrows out of bits of flint," replied Barney. The Snargets gaped at him with open mouths. "Look here," said the eldest at last. "This here's Stig of yourn. What is he then? A boy or a man?" Barney had to think a little before he answered. Then, "He's a caveman," he said. At once the Snargets burst into jeers and laughter again. "Yeah, soppy old caveman. He's got it out of a school book. He's pulling our legs, making out he knows a caveman. Come on, fellas, let's do him. Slow torture," they cried. But Barney leapt off the pile of rubble he was standing on and set off at a run towards the other end of the pit. The Snargets were after him with shrill cries. "He's off! Get him, fellas! You chicken! Run away, will you?" Barney jumped fallen tree trunks and burst through banks of nettles without caring for the stings. He knew the bottom of the pit better than the Snargets, and he seemed to be leaving them behind. Then he heard the voice of the eldest. "Take it easy, fellas. He can't get out of this end of the pit. Spread out so he don't double back." But Barney did not mean to double back. As quietly as he could, so that his pursuers could not hear him through the nettle banks and elder trees, he made for the entrance to Stig's den, flung himself through the low doorway and collapsed, puffing, blowing and pleased with himself, on the floor of the cave. Stig was there, busy making himself a really horrible-looking club out of a tree root into which he was fixing bits of flint, broken glass and rusty nails. "Hello, Stig," panted Barney. "I'm jolly glad to see you." But when he saw the horrible club, he began to feel almost sorry for the Snargits. He couldn't set this monster onto 3 little boys who hadn't really done anything to him yet. It may have to be only a game after all. You never could tell with the Snargits. Barney just smiled uncertainly at Stig, and Stig returned him a friendly grin. Then from outside came the sound of the Snargits calling to each other. "Has he gone back your way, Ted?" "No, I ain't seen him. Must be hiding round here somewheres." There were sounds of the undergrowth being beaten and stones being flung into bramble patches. Stig listened and looked at Barney suspiciously, but Barney made signs to be quiet. "Caw, wait till I get my hands on you, Mr. Barney, wherever you are," came the voice of the eldest Snargit. "I'm all nettle stings one side of me face. We'll roll him in the nettles when we get him, that's what we'll do." He sounded as if he meant it, and Barney felt he was not quite so sorry for the Snargits. Footsteps crackling on dry twigs sounded quite close to the den. Barney moved further back into the cave and made signs to Stig to do the same, but Stig stayed near the entrance, bristling. Suddenly the voice of the youngest Snargit piped up excitedly. "There's an hole! Here, a hole! Come out of it!" And a large lump of chalk came flying in through the entrance and hit Stig smack on the side of the head. Stig gave one roar and charged out of his doorway. Barney threw himself after him to see what would happen. The youngest Snargit gave one pop-eyed disbelieving look at Stig and turned and fled, sobbing and screaming. "Ah, it's a Kai! It's a Kai! It's a Kai! It's a Kai, man!" The Snargits, who had been closing in when they heard the youngest cry of discovery, saw Stig and turned and ran too. "Wait for me! Wait, don't leave me!" wailed the youngest, and then uttered a shrill scream of terror as he put his foot through the bottom of a rusty enamel basin and fell headlong. "Help! Help! Help! He's got me! He's got me! He's got me!" Almost as alarmed as the young Snargit, Barney ran up to where Stig was standing over the boy, who was shivering and moaning with fright and looked as if he expected to be eaten on the spot.